I'd like to get to spring practice in regards to, we all know it's difficult to get information, to know exactly what's going on. We don't get the firsthand knowledge or the firsthand look, at least. But we are going to have a spring game, I would think, unless it's been announced that in regards to what Notre Dame's doing.
Yeah, they haven't announced that there will or won't be. I would assume there will be. I think the only question will be whether or not it's going to be open to the public and not just like family and students or people on campus already.
So, Brian, for you, what storylines, what positions, what particular players, what's going to make you feel better about this team having made progress in the spring?
Well, I know Nathan knows where I'm going to go with this one, and it is I want to hear from people that they're changing the offense and adapting to more of a modern offense. I look, the ball control thing can get you so far. It's how you make sure you don't lose to teams you're not supposed to lose to, but it's not going to beat the teams that you should beat, because the funny thing is Notre Dame fans complain about how they don't have enough playmakers, but then they run an offense that dictates you have to have studs outside if it's going to be effective. You can't run the offense Notre Dame runs without Chase Claypool and Will Fuller. It requires great talent. You're not scheming guys into separation and into openings and scheming guys the way that Alabama does and the way that LSU did and Clemson did, and they're scheming with really good players. And so I'd like to see them open it up. I'd like to see them push the tempo a little bit. I don't think they need to be like Oregon under Chip Kelly. That's not what I'm calling for, but just be more aggressive, be willing to get more athletes on the field, spread the field out, bring the RPOs back. Ian Book ran RPOs in 2018, and he completed 70% of his passes. He never sniffed that completion percentage or those yards per attempt or the yards per game that he had in his first year in his next 2 years when they eliminated RPOs from the offense. And when you look at how it affected the run game, everybody talks about how good Kyron Williams was, and his numbers were good, but Kyron Williams had 0.6 yards, less yards per carry than Tony Jones Jr. had the year before. He had the lowest yards per carry for a starting running back in Notre Dame since 2014. And that's not because Kyron Williams isn't really good, because he is really good. But when they know, once they read run, once they dictate, once a safety sees that Notre Dame's offensive linemen are blocking for the run, they're flying downhill because they know you're not going to run an RPO against them. And I think doing things like that could not only impact your pass game, allow you to spread the field, get the ball outside, get your playmakers the ball, but now all of a sudden you're giving Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree more room to run. And that duo, if teams have to respect the perimeter, which they didn't do last year, good luck trying to stop Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams when that's going on. So those are things for me, Mark. I think Notre Dame is close in a lot of ways. But if they're not willing to be more aggressive and take more risks, I think Brian Kelly has become risk averse later in his career. And it's like, hey, we may not beat Clemson and Alabama, but we're not going to lose to Northwestern again. We're not going to lose to Louisville again. Notre Dame in the last 4 years is something like, I think it's like, if you look at 15, 17, 18, 19, and 20, Notre Dame's something like 51-0 against teams that finished the year unranked. That's consistency, but they're barely over 500 against teams that finished in the top 25. That's the next step for Notre Dame, and you have to be willing to take some chances and be more willing to take shots to win those games. You're not going to beat Alabama 17-14. It's just not going to happen. You got to be able to score.
And some people might say it's recruiting related, and I think to a certain extent it might be, but I think me and you agree that they have the wide receivers on the roster.
Sure. Got to use them.
Right. And last year, I guess there were some injuries involved with Austin and Lindsey. But I know me and you both think that Jordan Johnson and Xavier Watts could have probably produced at a decently high level as freshmen. You got a Lorenzo Styles coming in this year, who is a really highly rated kid and really dynamic with the ball in his hands. So, from that regard, there's really no excuse not to get those guys on the field and see what they can do, even when they're young.
Yeah. Because you guys know what the narrative is. The narrative is you've got an NFL offensive line. You've improved the defense considerably in terms of strength, speed, conditioning, everything on that side of the football. And that you've got a quarterback in Ian Book, who there could be a debate about in regards to him being a game manager, but then he lit up Clemson, and suddenly the world's eyes were open to what Ian Book could possibly do, that he was kind of this Brett Favre gunslinger all of a sudden out of nowhere. And but that, exactly to Nathan's point, that there's just the difference between the three schools that we all know, the names versus Notre Dame is game changers on the outside. Is that accurate?
I do. Do they have a Devontae Smith on their team? No, they don't. But, I remember in 2018 when they lost to Clemson, Brian Kelly said, we just need more playmakers on the perimeter. And I'm thinking, you have Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool, a pair of 6'4" guys that ran a 4.42 and a 4.43 at the combine and both jumped over 40 inches. Like you had Dexter Williams at running back. You had Kevin Austin on the sideline, Braden Lindsey on the sideline, not getting any playing time. You had Tommy Tremble on the sideline, not getting any playing time. And you had Alize Jones and Cole Kmet. And I'm like, if you don't have enough playmakers of that group, then I quit. I don't know. I give up. I don't know what you need. And, so that's kind of the frustrating thing is you've got these guys. And I argued with people going into the combine about Miles Boykin. I argued with people going into the combine about Chase Claypool because they said, well, those guys can't stretch the field. I'm like, look, I'm at every game. I'm not watching it off TV. I'm watching it live. I'm watching Chase Claypool be open by 3 or 4 yards down the field, and the ball's not coming. For a while, I kind of blamed Ian Book for that. But what I've come to realize is it's just one of those things where when it's beat into your head, don't do this. Don't turn the ball over. 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 There becomes a point in time where you're too neurotic about turnovers. So you don't want to turn the ball over. But I think you can focus so much on it that you almost paralyze your quarterback. And I think that's a part of the reason we've seen so much regression from quarterbacks at Notre Dame during their tenures in South Bend. And you see Ian Book come out and go 70% of his passes. He's almost 9 yards per pass attempt. If Ian Book would have completed 70% of his passes and been almost 9 yards per pass attempt this year like he was in 2018, who beats Notre Dame? I mean, it's just a different situation. And so can they get better athletes at receiver? You always try to get better. But it's like you have the athletes. They're standing behind. If you want to know where the playmakers are, coach, turn around. They're standing behind you on the sideline. You're the only school in America that doesn't get freshman receivers on the field with any kind of consistency, so it's because of the complexity of the offense. And, as every other school in the country is looking to simplify the offense, Notre Dame has made it more complicated. And that's the thing that needs to change.
Yeah. It's funny. All you have to do is turn on I know you mentioned, I don't go to as many games as Brian does, so he gets to see him live. I see him more on TV. But even then, you watch the film or watch the game, turn on Chase Claypool for the Steelers this year. Or just watch Miles Boykin when he's playing LSU before he was featured really in the offense. And he makes, an incredible catch and runs for, 53 yards down the field or whatever it was. And Claypool did that several times. I mean, watch Braden Lindsey in 2019 when he got the ball in his hands and what he did. I mean, the USC end around, is a really good example of that. And I know Brian said that, they don't really get freshman wide receivers, on the field consistently, but then you go look at the times that they have, and two notable times. I mean, obviously the teams were down, but TJ Jones, great player as a freshman, great player at Notre Dame in general, ended up being at least a decent player in the NFL for a few years. And then Kevin Stepherson was completely dynamic as a freshman. And if he never got into trouble off the field, he probably would be, a first or second round pick.
He'd be getting a big paycheck. Yeah.
He's just a really talented player. And I think he actually probably still could be if he gets the opportunity, this season. So those are two really good examples of guys that did get on the field as freshmen, whether or not Brian Kelly wanted to put him on the field or not, and he had to. But they showed they can produce when they do.